in our Captains of Industry talks, and to welcome this afternoon's speaker, GCU graduate and honorary graduate, Dr. Jane Milton. Through this series of talks, industry leaders share their career journeys and lessons learned, as well as providing insights into how COVID has impacted on their sector, and on the back of COP26, talk about what businesses are and can be doing to become more sustainable and socially accountable. Having met Jane on a number of occasions, I know that we're definitely in for a fascinating talk this afternoon. With over 30 years of experience in the food industry in the UK and overseas, Jane has a proven track record and is a highly sought after food consultant. Through her company, Jane Milton Limited, she helps producers, brand owners, innovators and retailers develop their ideas and find the fastest, most cost-effective route to market. Jane has also established her own podcast, Let Me Introduce You, and a successful networking and events group for the sector called Fresh Banter. She very generously gives back, sharing her time and expertise to mentor and provide advice to new startups, something that she's done on several occasions for our students and graduates here at GCU. We're extremely grateful, Jane, for all your support and thrilled to have you back with us this afternoon. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jane Milton, and I'll hand over to you to deliver this afternoon's talk. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see so many of you actually on screen and with us this afternoon. And I know too that this will be recorded, so a lot of people will get a chance to catch up later. I am pretty good if people reach out to me on LinkedIn and things too about connecting to you. So if you would prefer to ask things off screen later or find out about things, then please connect up with me. I normally go through all my new requests once a week on a Monday. So I normally come to it then and get that all organised. So I'd be happy to connect with any of you if I can help in any way. And I'm always looking out for things that I think would be of interest to GCU students and alumni, and returning those to the departments at the university that I think can relay them to current students and alumni best. So I'm always really happy to help. My background is that I did my first degree, which was a BA in home economics at what was Queen's College, which then became part of GCU, on a campus that no longer exists in Park in the Woodlands area of Glasgow. And it was great. I loved it. I had known since I was about 10 that I wanted to do something food related. And a family friend had said, what about teaching cookery or teaching home economics as it was then in schools? And that sounded like a good fit for me because I loved project work. I'm quite good at craft related things and things that you do with your hands. And I love to cook, and I also loved the textile side of the qualification that I was going to do if that was what I did. So from then it made sense that that's what I would probably do. The only fly in the ointment was that I was at a fairly academic school where the thought that anyone would do a degree in home economics scared them stupid. It didn't appeal to them at all. And most of the subjects that I wanted to take were timetabled against each other because they had made the assumption that if you wanted to do home economics, you probably weren't clever enough to do either chemistry or geography or anything else. So my mum and dad were great, and they really fought for me to get to do subjects I wanted, which meant that for 2 years I did all my higher chemistry classes, and the last of my my O-level as it was then, or O grade, chemistry 1-to-1 with the head of chemistry, who I'm sure was punishing me for wanting to do home economics as well. But that was quite hard going, but I knew why I wanted to do it, and I have never ever regretted that, because home economics at school was quite practical in those days, and you actually learned to cook and do things. Whereas when I started at uni, a lot of our practical classes were taught by video. So you watched the video and then you went into class faced with the whole chicken. and then discovered that folk who hadn't paid attention to the video didn't know whether they were putting their hand in the head end or the bottom end of the chicken. And I was grateful for my grounding in cookery and those kind of things, some of which I'd got at school, some of which I had also got at home. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was a great cook. And she could cook without recipes. She would see what was in the fridge and know what she could make with it. And on my dad's side of the family, they all love to bake, which is quite the opposite, because you absolutely have to follow the recipe and you can't deviate from it. So I had seen things done and had been involved in cooking and helping prepare meals and things, which was a great thing. My degree course I loved, and the subjects were good too. I did food and textiles, but what I hadn't really factored in was that meant that I would still have to do things that I might not have liked, like physics, which was part of the course too. But I also did social work and business management as subjects then too. And those have all been really useful to me. And in fact, I enjoyed the social stuff so much that I really did wonder at the end of my second year if I might want to do that more. I did a placement in a Salvation Army teenagers home and really enjoyed the impact that you could have on those people, and working with them and helping them and showing them things differently, giving them opportunities they might not have had. But the staff persuaded me that I was better as a volunteer. And that's something that I've carried on always, not always with the Salvation Army, but I have always had some aspect of volunteering in my life. I have been a prison visitor, which I would never have volunteered for if somebody else hadn't suggested it to me, but which was great and taught me a lot about other people's lives and how people end up where they are, and gave me a lot more empathy and a very different set of perspectives on life generally. I tend to think I'm quite good at mixing and can get on with anybody, but in those situations, I was meeting people that I would never have come across, I don't think, otherwise. And I really enjoyed that. So you learn a lot from anything. And when I graduated, I actually took a textile related first job. I went as a graduate trainee to Next, who were in 1986 at the height of the beginning of that business and in real growth. And they were taking 15 graduates, and they had 15,000 applicants. So I went through that process from 15,000 to 15. And now looking back, if I'm realistic, I think it was the fact that I'd had to fight so hard to get that job that made me take it, where really I already knew that I really loved food. And 1 year in, I had learned an amazing amount as a graduate with them, because if you showed aptitude to anything, you would end up in charge of it within a few months. So I had some phenomenal experience, but I'm really glad that I, at the end of that graduate scheme, decided that Next were not going into, they had cafes, but they weren't going into food enough for me to want to stay with them. And I left and I joined Greggs, the bakery company. Quite the reverse of the glamour of being in Next, when everybody had, when that company had just started and it was quite trendy to work there and things. And I switched from that to a hairnet and a nice white overall every day at Greggs. But Greggs was a very people-centered business, and it was a great place for me to be, and I really enjoyed it. And I've done pieces of work for them since, and I've kept in touch with a lot of people, including the people that I started work with the very first day. I'm still in touch with them. One of them is a director at, on the retail side now, and it is a great, very people-centered business. And that was probably where I learned how much people mattered to me and how much how people treated people mattered to me. So I was with Greggs the first time for a couple of years, and I was responsible for changing the importance of sandwiches in the business in Scotland and making them from something that we made in every shop, but by buying ingredients from the shops next to us, so we had no control over what we were getting, to becoming centrally purchased but still made in every store, and finding manufacturers to make all those ingredients for them and retrain all the staff to make them all, so that wherever in Scotland you bought a sandwich, it should be the same sandwich. And then making that a bigger part of the business, which in the end resulted in them choosing premises because they were good for selling takeaway, rather than because you would go there to get a loaf and 6 cakes. And I mean, now most people think of Greggs as a food to go business rather than that. So it was great, and they were super, and they pushed me to go and speak to the other divisions of the business, which all operated separately at that time, about the work that we'd done in Scotland on sandwiches, and to help them spread that nationally. And I did that, a bit of that. And then I had done a marketing postgrad while I was there, and I left Greggs then to join a Mexican-American food company called Discovery Foods, whose products don't exist anymore, but I went there as their food service marketing manager, and it was a chance to put my marketing into practice because Greggs had no marketing department. And I had an open discussion with my boss at Greggs about the fact that I thought I should use my marketing qualification. And they said, we think so too, but we don't have that opportunity here. So go away and keep in touch. And if the right thing comes up, we would always bring you back. And that made such a difference, being able to look for a job, discuss the job options with your current boss. You know, that they just wanted what was best for me, and they were really great about that. And so I left, but on very friendly footing, and then went back a few years later, after I had been with Discovery for a couple of years. Greggs asked me to come and do a project for them. I was freelancing by then, and they asked me to come and do a project for them to look at the sandwich business nationally as a whole. And in my usually very direct and forthright way, I told them everything that I thought they were all doing wrong, without really realizing that most of them were twice my age and had thought that they were, you know, perfectly happy with how they were doing things. So I said to them, you know, this is what I think you're doing wrong. And so they said, come back and fix it then. And so I came back into the business based in the southeast, and that was when I moved to London, where I still live. And I became responsible for helping in the southeast for them to grow their market share in the sandwich business. And I worked between 3 bakeries and travelled a lot then, doing 40 or 50,000 miles a year within the UK, and mixing with food manufacturers and suppliers right through to individual store sites and things. And I loved all of that. And then after a couple of years, I left there to start my own business. And so I left that project with them, and I started my own business, but was based in the southeast. I just stayed in that area. There's so much happens in and around the south of England with food. A lot of the supermarkets were based there, and also a lot of new food trends, because people who migrate to the UK very often end up in the southeast first. So we tend to see new food flavours and new things there, and a lot of restaurants big groups try trends outside of London to see if they work. And also by then I was travelling quite a bit for work, and so it made sense to be near a main airport where I could go anywhere really from. And so I have always lived quite near Heathrow in London, which makes it quick to get up to Glasgow if I need to. And I have been known to pop up for a day for something that I need to do, but also to get anywhere else in the world, really. It's quite straightforward. So I have been now 25 years running my own food and drink consultancy, with a slant towards marketing and strategy. So helping people organise themselves, helping them work out what the fastest way to make money of all the options they've got, which one will get them there fastest, helping people work out if they outgrow what they're doing, how they can get somebody else to manufacture for them, and then helping them find that manufacturer. and helping people from outside the UK understand what we all take for granted, but we have some of the best food packaging. It has some of the most incredible amounts of information on it about products, and that has all just been tightened up again because of Natasha's law and the changes that that has made to unpackaged products and things that are sold off-site. And you know, our labeling and things are great. What customers expect, they expect recipes, they expect to be told how to use things. They want all that information on pack. They want it on the website. They want, you know, they want to, we get a lot on social media too. You can get in among a food company much more easily in this country because of Instagram and Twitter and now TikTok, and all of those things allow you to really dig in and find out about businesses. And it's something that really surprises a lot of the companies that we work with from overseas, that, you know, they'll say, we've got an Instagram page, and I'm saying, which you post on once a fortnight in Arabic, which won't really help us. So, you know, you're going to have an account. Or even in the last 2 years, I've been working with a Swiss business that makes sauerkraut and kimchi and all those things. And for them, it's a 120-year-old business. Sauerkraut is German, so they're on the Swiss-German border. So it's, you know, a German product, a Swiss product. They don't need any explanation. It almost comes in a clear bag. People just know what it is and they buy it. And during the pandemic, their sales doubled because people there knew it was good for you and good for your gut, and they went and bought it. And when they were coming here, I was saying to them, we'll need recipes. You'll need to tell people how to use it. You need to tell them that they can cook with it and it doesn't diminish what it does for you. And they just couldn't believe how little we would know about that. You know, they just thought they had to show us the packet and we would all go and buy it. So often it's very different, and it's about finding how best to do that. And pre-COVID, what I hadn't really realised was that I was travelling about 70% of my time because I was working outside the UK with food manufacturers and food brands that wanted to come into the UK, helping them understand our market better. And so since the pandemic, that has changed drastically. I have 2 dogs who had lived a very charmed life of permanently having dog sitters look after them, whose main focus was the dog for the entire day. And they've not taken so well to the fact that I'm at home and expect them to sit quietly in the office for 8 hours a day before I do anything with them. And I think they would quite like me to get back out and be traveling again. But it's been, you know, it has changed drastically, and I have changed a lot about the business in the last 2 years, trying to work out how long we might not be able to travel for. And now that folk have got used to Zoom, hopefully I won't need to travel for some of the very short meetings that I would go to the other side of the world for. And what that means is that I'm more accessible to people, so it's more affordable for people in developing countries and things to work with us and for us to help people in those places. So one of the things that I have invested in is some glasses that I can wear that have 2 cameras on them. And there's one right between your eyes, there's another one here with a zoom lens on it. And they look obvious, I think. And the first day that I wore them in a store, I thought, I'm going to be asked to leave. But I have to say that the great benefit to living and working in London, where nobody looks you straight in the eye and everybody's terrified that you might speak to them, is that nobody's ever even questioned me about them. And I can go around a store, I can look at shelves with customers. And it's funny, but I would always have sent them photos before, but for some reason, when they come here, they always say, oh, now I understand, or now I see how much choice you've got. And I think, did I not send you a whole aisle of photographs and things? But it just, in real life, it's easier. The glasses are phenomenal. I can walk around and show them stuff. We can come in the door and they can see how far away from the door the product is before you get to it, what's on the top shelf, who's paid to be at eye level, who's on the bottom. And at the moment, the big problem, what's out of stock? So I was telling the kiddos earlier on that I went to show a Swiss customer a supermarket aisle to have a look at tortilla chips and what price they were and whether there is a market for them in the UK, because it's a an organic premium product, and was there really a market for them? And of course, most of the shelves were empty. And then we passed the newspapers where there was a story on the front page about Wotsits being £8 a packet on eBay that day. So they saw firsthand what the crisp shortage had done for us. But, you know, it is much more relatable. So we've invested in that equipment, about £3,500, and then a lot of pain learning how to use it, showing customers the inside of all my cupboards at home, which is a real lesson in keeping yourself tidy, so that I could explain to them how it would work, and then signing them up for it and things, and working with them on that. But I think that will make a huge difference to who we can help and how we can help them, how quickly we can help them. Within about an hour, they could be walking down an aisle with me to have a look at products, and it's amazing what else that prompts if you're actually in the aisle with them. Well, what was that? Why do they sell that? How much is that? You know, I mean, amazing conversations that we're having. So the pandemic has definitely changed things for us. It's also changed because a lot of although the supermarkets were selling out of stuff, the way they responded to that was they minimized massively the amount of variety they were selling. So instead of selling 42 different variants of ketchup, who knew we needed so many, they went back to about 5. So a lot of customers' time now is trying to get their product back on the shelf if they had it on the shelf before. So we've been doing that. Also, a lot of my clients would spread their risk. So they would have had some stuff in retail, some in food service, some stuff with the airlines. And the thing was, COVID affected all of those. And so, you know, everything, they've lost the benefit of a lot of those things. So now we're trying to work our way back with that. And also, I think as a country, a lot more folk discovered how to cook when all the restaurants were shut and they had to. And now that their lives have picked up the pace again, they want to do that, but they need all the hacks, all the slow cookers, all the other things. So it's also looking at what your consumer looks like now and what they're really likely to be doing and how you're going to help them. And then we're back working with Airlines again, all of whom froze everything 2 years ago, and then of course still watched it go out of date. And last year we were doing a lot of pairing companies up with food charities so they could donate all the stuff before it went out of date and get it used. And although, you know, there are things happening in the UK now and the economy, you know, we're shopping again and things, food poverty, unfortunately, has gone off the scale during that time. And I work in London with a charity that repurposes food that would go out of date or is out of spec for a manufacturer or an overrun for them or any of that stuff. And they were doing 1 million meals a year. And in the last 6 months, they've done 16 million meals of rescued food to people. They have a waiting list of 330 charities wanting their food. So there is a huge problem, and some of it was there before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just highlighted it. But there are other people whose, when they were cut to working 80%, you know, the furlough money was being paid to them, they were only getting 80% of their salary. That other 20% was the money they spent on food. Now that everybody's electricity and stuff has gone up in price too, the demands on food banks and food charities and clubs at schools that feed kids and things are massive. And so I've been doing a lot of work recently making food businesses aware of how they can get food to people and what they can do, and you know how they can get it there, how they can get it there safely, all the requirements for them to do it under Natasha's law and everything else now that we're dealing with. But that is going to be a massive part of what we do for a long time still, unfortunately, because there are going to be a lot more folk in need in the next year. You know that things unfortunately are going to get harder for people because furlough things have stopped. More companies are going to go bust because a lot of people are now being asked to pay back loans that their businesses took last year before their businesses are actually back on their feet and making money. And if there isn't enough flexibility in that within the UK, that will be a big problem. For some of my overseas clients, it has hit them differently, because in Sri Lanka, where I have a big client, they couldn't work from home because they don't have the infrastructure to do it. They couldn't access their servers and things. Even their most senior directors and folk had to go in. And in the marketing team in the tea company that I work with, there's a marketing team of 7. 2 of them died from COVID. 2 young people died from COVID during the outbreak, you know, so the effects have been very different depending on where you are. And now it's just looking at how we can help all of them build back and come back, and what we can do to make things more accessible to them and help them. So I think you're up to date on where I am, trying to work out who wants me to travel and doesn't, and how we can get around it. But I love what I do. I've been very lucky to be able to work for myself for the last 25 years and shape how I do that, and not work with people that don't have the same ethics as me, or don't have the same values or standards as me, or try and encourage people to stretch themselves to those standards. So I've never regretted it, and I work quite hard too to encourage people at school to think of a career in food not as the end of your life, because there are still careers teachers who will tell you that if you don't pay attention, you could end up working in a food factory. And I would say there couldn't be a better place to work. So I do quite a lot to encourage folk to think about careers in food, because I think there's so much that our industry offers people that I really want to encourage people into it. So I'm ready to answer your questions, Sophie.
Jane, that was such an interesting talk, and we really appreciate you being here today. And we've also got some students, graduates and staff from across our London, Glasgow and New York campus joining us today as well. So we've got a lot of pre-submitted questions already that we'll get on to, but if you still want to submit a question to Jane, you can do this by putting it in the chat box and I'll ask on your behalf. If you want to ask Jane a question in person, just click the raise hand button, which can be found in the reactions icon, and I'll come to you directly. But we'll kick off just now with one of the pre-submitted questions. So the first one comes from a graduate, Milka, who asks, what are the benefits and or costs for the countries if they invest in the food and agricultural sector, considering that it is one of the largest industries in the world?
So on that question, I mean, I would say that there are definitely benefits. And as we have discovered over the last couple of years, there's massive benefit in food security, in knowing where your food supply comes from, and in having as much as possible in our own country. So it's not only more sustainable for us if we're buying it locally, you know, it's more environmentally friendly, we're using less transport to get it to us, we're not flying stuff from the other side of the world to be here with us. So I think that people should try to supply their domestic market first. Would always be, you know, there's no point in making life harder for yourself and sending your stuff further away if you can supply it into your domestic market. Sometimes depending on the development stage of your domestic market, it might be that there is more profit for you even after you've transported it, in looking outside your own country, because in some countries their markets are not as complex and there isn't as much room. And the thing that always surprises people from other countries when they come into the UK is how much we buy already made, already prepared, you know, just things that they're not seeing. They're still seeing very basic ingredients in some countries. And so when they come here, they can't believe how much we can buy already made. So there is a market here for stuff which definitely attracts people, but having your own food supply in country and supplying the things that people want would be always my starting point. And then looking at how close to home you can export if you have to export. So, you know, people in the UK historically have always thought, oh, I would export that to America or Australia. And then I'd be going, have you sold it to anyone in Ireland yet? Oh, no. Well, let's start there and start with your local markets and things who speak the same languages as you, who don't require rewritten packaging, that kind of thing. And then if your product has shelf life and can travel further afield, and you still have more than you can supply into the local markets, then look at exporting further afield. But again, where are you going to make the quickest wins? So who else can take it without you having to completely relabel it, change your instructions? And just like the sauerkraut thing shows, you know, going from Switzerland to the UK, you have to understand the differences in what we eat and how much explanation that might take. Although interestingly, Heinz are about to bring sauerkraut into UK, and what that means is that that market is widening up, and so there are more opportunities for it beyond some of the artisan companies that have been producing it. So there are definite benefits of investing in food, definitely within a country, but I would say don't think of it as a means to export first. The other thing is that margins on food are some of the smallest in all consumer goods. Consumer food margins for end producers are small. So if you drop a pallet of something, or if it gets stuck at customs because your paperwork wasn't right, you will lose all the profitability probably on the next 6 pallets. So it's not an easy option to ship it out of your country to another country. So I would always think, you know, the food sector is a thriving one. If you have tourists coming to your country, and I've seen that Milka's question, I think she's based in Greece, you know, and if you've got tourists coming from Greece, from the UK to Greece on holiday, they'll be looking for that food in the UK when they come back. They'll be wanting to reproduce meals and make things using ingredients they've seen. So there will be a market here for it, but I would say look at your home market first. So I hope that answers the question.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And the next one we have is from Tahir, who's a graduate, and they ask, how can you trust food products?
That, I wasn't 100% sure what he meant by that. I don't know if he's on the discussion, but if he is and he wants to put something in the chat, I know you'll pick up on it. But how can you trust food products? So I have been in the middle of some of the biggest food scandals in the UK, the horse meat scandal being one of the worst things, you know, when horse meat was detected in food that was meant to have beef in it. And I was actually called onto Sky Television that night, which is the peril of living within a mile of their the main television centre, is that if they need somebody to talk about something quickly, it's very often me they get. And at that time, we didn't know what that story was. It started at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night, which is always when these things start. Saturdays or Sundays when you can't get hold of buyers or anybody else to tell you about something. And I said at the beginning of that, this is definitely going to be something, there is some fraud here somewhere in this system, because our traceability on food is very good. And you can do now farm to fork on a lot of things from this country and from other countries. Anyone who holds BRC, which is the main British Retail Consortium qualifications that you need to supply into the major multiples, the major hotel groups and things, which they need for insurance, that is a rigorous process where you need to show exactly who your supply chain are and where it came from. So I knew that if these big manufacturers had ended up with horse meat, that somewhere along the lines there must have been a fraud, and exactly that was what had happened. So generally speaking, you can really trust what it says on the packet, and that is fundamental if you suffer from food allergies and things. And so, you know, it's something that we must never take lightly, our responsibility to that. And if a big manufacturer can't get something, as is happening a lot at the moment, and they have to change suppliers of things, the rigor with which they then have to trace that all through, you know, to find whether the person they're buying Worcestershire sauce from is using, you know, where all their ingredients that go into that go into, even if there's only a splash of that going into a final dish, you know, there's a huge amount of traceability. So I would say that we really can trust food products. And restaurants too now know, both the big chains who've always had to have full ingredient lists and allergy information and things available, and also small independent stores. Some of the tragic cases in recent years of people dying as a result of being given something that had an allergen in it for them, I think that really brings home to people that it's not just somebody being annoying, asking you for information, that it can really be life and death for people. And it's not just they might feel a bit off, or they might feel a bit bloated or something. If somebody has a real allergy to something, it very often can be fatal. And I think people understand that more now. And so I think that people do tighten up a lot on what you can get, and all the symbols like the celiac symbol and all the different allergy awareness regulators that there are have made a lot of that safer for people too. So how can you trust food products? Certainly within our industry in the UK, I believe that we have some of the best people and some of the best systems. And one of the things, we tied ourselves in knots when we agreed things across the EU, trying to make those regulations work and things. I have been in food factories in other countries in Europe where people have been smoking while they were talking to me. And I have come home with notes that smell of smoke from meetings that were held inside food factories and things. And I always think about us, we love a rule. And if there is a rule, we absolutely follow it. We really do. So I certainly think I would have confidence in what it says. And how can we trust food companies? We can. People also will tell you, portion sizes on some things have got bigger and that food manufacturers are trying to make you eat more, but we all have a degree of personal responsibility for what we eat. And just because somebody sells something doesn't mean you have to eat it. And I think there is a lot of information on pack with traffic lighting and things like that too, that allows you to make the choices. And it's difficult because what is a big portion of lasagna and a ready meal for an 80-something-year-old lady is very different to what an 18-year-old student would like as a portion. And, whether you then eat that lasagna with chips or whether you eat it with salad will make a huge difference to the final outcome of that meal as well. And a lot of that is personal responsibility. But I do think we get a lot of information that allows us to make those choices. So I think that's
perfect. Thank you, Jane.
Good.
And the next one comes from Monica, and she asks, I would like to know which is the standard format for nutritional labelling for products made in India but imported in the UK, and where I can check the guidelines.
So I have given you in advance a link for that. I think you're going to post up, and certainly we'll share with her. It's the Food Standards Agency pages. They are the best place. You can Google is a dangerous thing because you can find all kinds of people offering you advice, but it might not be right, and it also might not be totally up to date. If you look on the Food Standards Agency pages for their nutritional labelling requirements, and I mean now unfortunately they'll show you information for Northern Ireland, information for England, information for Scotland. If you're importing into the whole of the UK, you have to make sure you comply with everything that's on that information. So, and I mean, recently Natasha's law, the law that was brought about because of an allergy sufferer's death from eating something that hadn't been, or where the labelling wasn't on the final product, it was on the shelf in the store, and she failed because of that to see something. I think now that information has all been added to your nutritional labelling requirements. Our labelling requirements are different from other places. That it's not okay if you've got a table on your box with the fat and things. You have to have exactly the information that we ask for per 100 grams, per portion. It used to be the only products that were healthy were making health claims, had to have health information on it. that has changed. Again, that information's been updated on the Food Standards Agency website. So I would say always go back to there. If you're in India, and then before you print final packaging for something, pay somebody to check it for you who is accredited. I'm happy to point them towards people. The people that we use in the UK are charge us per label to look at labels, but they're insured for the advice they give us. So were they to make a slip up, then their insurer will pay for all that packaging to be reprinted, which quite frankly makes it worth its weight in gold to me. When I speak to them, they will talk about test cases a fortnight earlier, where the judgment in a court case might affect people's interpretation of a piece of food law, which would then, change what would happen on a piece of packaging. So it's a very complex process, and I think you're always best to check before you print thousands of things. It always amazes me, people that will print thousands of something without checking too that their brand name is not registered to another company in the UK. I know people who use their family name as a company name, and then come to the UK and discover that, a huge company like Haribo has that name trademarked for the UK, and you can't use it. So do all your homework before you send products here. It's much better to pay for that information and get it right than to have to redo all your packaging or remove all your product from shelf in the UK because the packaging is not legal, which is what would happen. So it's worth checking. But Food Standards Agency is a first place, definitely.
Thank you, Jane. I put that link in the chat for anybody that wants to have a look at that. And then the next question was from Christine, and she asked for some of your favourite food and recipes. So I know you sent links to those, so I'll put all them in the chat as well. They all look very good.
All I would say on food is I always want to eat whatever I haven't had to eat all week for work. My food preferences change massively, but during lockdown, I was participating in a monthly cheese education class that was being run by a cheesemonger, and they would send you 2 bits of cheese each month, and then you would meet the producer and hear all about it from artisan producers who were really struggling because they would normally supply restaurants, and the restaurants were all shut. So British regional cheese is what I'm loving at the moment, and I am buying other people cheeses presents all the time. And I would say support local people to you. In London, the cheesemonger that I've put in a link to, or the cheese maker, he is based in London. He chose to be based in London after the riots in Tottenham in London gave that part of London a bad name, and he was looking for somewhere to set up and was going out into the countryside somewhere, and he decided that a good news story about food in that area was much more important. So he set his business up there. He supplies people at Raymond Blanc and things, and when they were all shut, he just didn't know what to do, and he had to take market stalls, and he started sending cheese out to people and things, and his cheese is fantastic. But there are hundreds of small artisan cheese producers all over Scotland as well. So, look for your local ones and support them. And then the recipes, I think I'd mentioned this book, which is called Second Helpings, and you can see it's all well marked with recipes that I'm planning to do. And this is a lovely taco recipe. They use cod. I wouldn't. I would use something, I would always use MSC fish anyway, so that we're not depleting stocks of fish. But there's so much to eat seasonally and locally that I would go with that and just adapt a recipe to suit that. But I'm always interested in recipes and always doing new things. So, but these are the ones that I'm doing this week. That book also, that girl featured on my podcast this week, and the book's lovely because it's kind of her family recipe book, and so it's full of non-fussy, everyday kind of quick things to make when you've finished working for the day and things, and it is super. So that's where I'm cooking from at the moment, but it'll change. Next week I'll be cooking for something else. That's what I love. Okay.
Thank you. All rushing home now to make these recipes.
I know.
And the next question we have is from Sharon, and she asks, discounting the vegan sausage roll, what do you think was the main driver for success and mass expansion of Greggs? This comes from the chat.
Greg's has been doing well all along, steadily, and I would say that one of the things that has made Greg so successful is the way they put people first. They always have. When I was working for them 30 something years ago, we could give from our salaries to charity and they matched it. And they have regional charity groups that decide what regional charities they support. So it's local choice. They really care about their staff. They've always tried to do more for their staff than the minimum legal requirements, and genuinely care about them. And I think that is what has given them longevity over a very long period of time and kept them, you know, at the top of things. They also took saturated fat out of products a long time ago. They looked at their best products and cleaned them up as much as they could and then worked their way through the rest of the ranges and things. They're an affordable treat for a lot of people, and I think that also has helped them in the last few years when things were tough, you know, and you can just pop and buy something and it's not a huge amount of money. And then they've also looked at putting stuff into places like Iceland so you can buy it and take it home, cook at home. So they're open to change as well, I would say, is part of their success.
Perfect, thank you. And Sharon also asks, do you think we will ever move away from big supermarkets and go back to small shops in the high street?
Now, somebody else asked something similar to that in our advanced questions as well. I think that happened quite a lot last year because people discovered their local shops. And I think where your local shops adapted to that. I mean, we have a very nice deli near us and it only sold food. And during lockdown, they started selling washing up liquid and other things that people would need, toilet roll if they could get it, you know, I mean, like all those things, and they've stuck with that and they've done well and people have stuck with them because they appreciated that they were there. Butcher shops did well. Butcher shops did well after the horse meat scandal too, because folk wanted to see the face of the person that was giving them meat and know what they were getting and have those conversations with people and things. So I do think that there is definitely a place for small producers and local producers, but there are also companies that will always make things in quantities that they will need to sell to bigger producers, because to be able to capitalize on making those things as cost effectively as they can, they need to supply a large number of people. So there will always be a place for both, I think. And if you look at food poverty just now, you know, there are a lot of people whose biggest worry is whether or not they can afford to buy stuff, never mind where it came from or whether it's from a nice small producer, or nutritionally what it does for them. It's about filling up. And I think the lack of skill that people have in knowing how to cook is another big thing, because it means that they have to fall on ready prepared meals and things. And I think there's a lot to be done in educating people and also in putting pressure on social housing and things. Often if people get given a house on social housing, there will be no cooker with it. And so they will end up buying a microwave because they can buy it for £30 and plug it in. It doesn't need to be installed. There are a lot of houses in the UK that will not have an oven, that can't afford to use an oven, that will not have a hob. And so that massively limits, and I think we need to look at how we address that as a community and how, you know, how we make those changes. But I definitely think there's a place for small producers. I also think a lot of folk have discovered online shopping, which means you can get stuff from a lot of places. But I also think we need to look at how sustainable some of that is. And, you know, people can't be getting one thing from you and one thing from somebody else and a bill for each. And, you know, it's a lot of work for a small shop, even to buy a lot of stuff from a lot of small people. So I think we have to pool delivery resources and things. And I think going through, you know, a site where they're selling a number of items of food so that you can fill up a basket and maybe only take one delivery a fortnight or one delivery a month on things is good. And buying direct from producers as well on things like meat or fish. And, you know, but accepting that you'll only have what they're offering at that time and that your choices are more limited. I think we all have to ask it. I mean, at the same time as everybody's talking about sustainability, there's a massive increase in cities, in these ultra convenience companies like Getir, Whizzy, Wheezy, Jiffy. There are hundreds of them at the moment. And I know producers who are getting so much demand from them that they're limiting how much they're allowing them to buy from them, because it's really disrupting their whole business model to supply them. And these are people that will deliver to you within 10 minutes of your order, who are only covering an area a mile in a city and sending food out to people 4 or 5 times a day as people decide what they might want to eat. And I think we need to ask ourselves if that's the best use of the delivery systems as well, and look at how we make use of all those things. There is a lot of convenience and ultra convenience, but I think, and I've been doing a little bit recently looking at vending machines outside shops, selling outside hours, and asking people what you would want in them if they did that. And it's quite funny, the things that you can get in food vending machines and things. So again, I think, you know, we need to look at, as consumers, what we're all asking for too.
Thank you, Jane. It's really interesting. I think we've got time for one more question this afternoon. So Richard asks, why are supermarkets taking so long, e.g. Sainsbury's 6 years to phase out plastic bags in the UK when supermarkets in Europe use paper bags already?
A few things. I mean, one is take your own bags, and then you don't even need to enter into the plastic bag, carry on. You know, if you've got your own fabric bags and wicker bags and different things that you're using, then take your own bags with you. And I mean, with paper, one of the problems is if you're taking it and walking home, then with our weather, a paper bag isn't always your best answer anyway, because, you know, you can end up with all your shopping coming out the bottom of it before you get home if it gets wet. So I think definitely having your own bags, but I mean, some of the supermarkets have now completely got rid of plastic and they're not offering any plastic options. The other thing is, I imagine some of them will have ordered some years ahead to secure stock at cheap prices some years ago. So, you know, these things all take time to work out. I have sent you some links to some other, to one story about a big food manufacturer that's trying to get nearer to net zero, and they're having to invest £13.5 million to upgrade their refrigeration systems. And I mean, these are all things that they'll have contracts with people and things. I think as we decide to change things too, we've got to be mindful of the impact that has right down the line back to suppliers in developing countries that are only geared up to supply us with certain things, and who, if we all decide not to buy that thing anymore, there'll be big impact. And I think we have to look at how we address that and how we give them alternatives first too. So loads to think about and talk about.
Absolutely. I think we could be here for another hour or two, Jane, talking about foods, and we're all probably going to be raging our fridges after this to see if we can make those tacos. They looked amazing. But we'll post the links, we'll put the links into the follow-up email when we send the link out for the video to everybody, so that they can see those if they haven't managed to get those from the chat. But just want to say a huge thank you, Jane, for a fascinating talk. You're very clearly passionate about what you do, and I think you've definitely sold it to us that the food and drinks industry is one that should be one of your first choices, as opposed to the bottom choice for students and graduates. You know, I think as well, just hearing the range of roles that are available in the sector that people might not think about is definitely something that's worth considering. So when we do share the video, we actually share it as well with some of the colleges that we partner with as well, so it will go to a wider student audience. I'm sure that you'll inspire many to follow suit and join in your career path. I'd also like to encourage the students and graduates to take you up on your very kind offer to connect on LinkedIn. You know, Jane shares a wealth of her experience on that as well. You can get links to her podcast, which is really interesting. There's over 30 episodes so far of that, and many more to come. So that was very kind of you to offer that, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people connecting with you afterwards as well. But on behalf of everybody at GCU, I just want to say a huge thank you for your continued support of our students and graduates and for giving back your time. We've really appreciated the talk, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. So thanks very much, Jane.
Thank you. Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care. Thanks.
Bye.